Journal of Arthur Thorne, the 2nd of November, London. I have begun to journal at the suggestion of a friend. He told me it was a good way to reflect on the events of the day. I admit I was apprehensive at trying the hobby. It seemed like the kind of thing to make men brood, but as the son of a successful shipping operator of Her Majesty's Empire, I thought it might do me good to reflect on my goings-on, to accustom myself, to better consider my actions and not overlook any of the opportunities before me. So I suppose this marks the beginning. I hope Father approves when next he writes. I'm sure Aunt Rebecca would approve, though that worries me. I wouldn't want to appear overly feminine. I'm already the victim of horrid jest by my friends for being a bully trap. I confess I haven't the faintest idea as to what I should write about. Today I joined my friend, Benjamin, for a bit of riding. We rode out to Strood, where we ate a hearty meal of meat pies, eggs, beans, tea, beer for Benjamin, and a couple of raspberry tarts. I was so stuffed I could hardly lift myself from the table, and Ben, as he prefers I call him — Americans are very informal, I've learned — but Ben suggested we stay the rest of the day and ride back to London the next day. Maybe do a bit of fishing or hunting. It sounded like a fun idea, but responsibilities should never be neglected, so I was forced to decline. Ben answered with some American adage which he is fond of using. Very confusing how Americans speak English, but have made it so alien and utterly devoid of British nuance. It's as though they have taken a stiff board and made it bendy, more flexible and full of shortcuts. I cannot understand it, but it's very charming and funny to listen to, especially when a few of the old Tories hear it. Their expressions are hilarious. It's so late outside, I should really be going to bed, but I don't want to forget anything. I think tomorrow I will visit my grandparents. With all this talk of Jack the Ripper, I've begun to carry a knife on me in a metal sheath given to me by Ben. Maybe I'll see if we can go out to St. Albans or picnic in Hyde Park. I should also consider my studies, but I lost all consideration for them. The more I try to focus on them, the more my mind seems to blur until I feel like the traditional London fog has invaded my brain. I'm sure Father would scold me, but if I'm honest, I'm bored by it all. I'd rather get involved in the business or even sailing, negotiating trades and bartering for the best deal. I should also write to Emily. When it comes to charming Americans, she is without equal. She is entirely different to English women. She's louder, less formal, and more open when she laughs. I don't think I've ever seen her not smiling or hesitate to join in on a conversation. I like that she engages me. I admit I fancy her greatly. Things only exist so long as to capture her amusement and exuberance, and if something upsets her, she says as much, then casts it off. When we last went to the park in summer, she had the audacity to take off her shoes and soak her feet in the water. Then later, when we were in the boat, going along the Serpentine, I may have been a bit cheeky with my humour, and, to get even, she started splashing me with water. Naturally, I responded. We both got back to land positively soaked and smiling. I best never let Father know about that. If anything might motivate him to appear again, it would be that. Just long enough to show up and chastise me, drown me in the Thames, and deny he ever had a son. Makes me wonder what Mother would think. Well, I think that is quite enough for one day. Off to bed with me. It's quite late, and if I'm up any longer, I fear I'll have restless dreams again. The 4th of November, London. Forgot to write in my journal yesterday. Suppose making something a habit is more than just asserting that it is. Fine, to be fair, I was terribly busy the other day. Bear in mind, this was not a bad thing or uncomfortable by any measure. I was just occupied. I visited my grandparents, as I said I would. Grandmother was affectionate as ever. I had hardly made it through the door, and already she had assaulted me with a myriad of questions, ranging from how I was, to if I wanted tea, how was my trip there, and if I was hungry. I was grateful when Grandfather intervened, giving me a moment to breathe while she summoned the maid for tea. Grandfather, old Albert Thorne, the patriarch of the family, was in a fine mood. No sooner did he come to greet me than did he have an arm around my shoulders, guiding me to the sitting room where we were to talk. Grandmother returned shortly after, coming to sit with us, and we enjoyed some tea and cakes, talking about nothing really. My grandfather is a very patriotic man, so I try not to speak of politics, and I've no doubt he wouldn't approve of my affections for Emily. An English girl, he would say, England against the world. Well, when England was the world, what then? I don't share these thoughts with my grandfather. I love my country and our queen, but I confess a fancy for adventure, hunting exotic animals in the African subcontinent, riding horses in the American West, visiting the tropic jungles of Brazil, maybe even a trip to the Orient to sample their exotic foods. I feel like the common Englishman would rather have the world brought to him in tasteful doses, like adding sugar into their tea. A bit was nice, a little more might be sweet, but after that, oh, it was far too much. I love the comfort of England as much as the next good lad, but I enjoy the idea of being forced into discomfort, into challenging myself, growing into the kind of man that would make my father proud. I don't mean to complain. I am a blessed man to enjoy the life I do, my health, education, garments. Why, even the company I keep is a good sort, though one could wonder when asked about my good friend Harriet. Darned fool, always mixing himself up in a fuss from Westminster to Whitechapel. But enough of all this, it's not the point. Maybe I should come back to it another time, though. If for no other reason, then it would make for some very amusing stories to read back on. My grandparents were both in good health, though that seems to run in the family. I've hardly ever been ill, and Father and Aunt Rebecca are still the picture of youth when last I saw them. We spoke for an hour, like I said, about nothing too controversial, wanting to keep conversation pleasant. I did ask if we should go picnic in the park or on a trip. Grandmother thought it was a lovely idea. Grandfather checked his pocket watch and said it shouldn't be a problem. After our picnic, we should go see the opera. It made for a wonderful day. We went to Hyde Park, walked the gardens. Grandfather invited me to go hunting this month before it got any colder, and the opera was lovely, if a bit dry. When finally I retired for bed, I had forgotten completely about the journal, so I did not write. I think from now on I shall leave it on my bedside table, so I might see it before retiring, in the event I don't remember beforehand. As for today, I began my morning with a small breakfast, before joining Ben, Harriet, and Jonathan for a game of polo, before going to a gentleman's club where we had tea and a bit of lunch. Jonathan was going on about wanting to join Her Majesty's army to serve in the colonies, something Harriet derided, not out of a lack of civic duty or respect to the crown, but true to his nature, Harriet encouraged Jonathan to first make the most of his freedom in the Empire before going off to fight for it. Jonathan would have none of it. Despite his family's modest means, his father being the chief solicitor of his company in Whitby, Jonathan wants to be something greater. I suspect he will stop at nothing until he has the title of Lord at the least. He clearly believes the military is the surest way to increase his social standing and marry well. Ben chipped in a little here and there, but it was obvious he had no real care for the subject. Any time Jonathan began going on about Queen and country, Ben would get the queerest look in his eye, like he wished to say something which might cause offence. For my part, I suggested that Jonathan finish his education and affairs in the Isles before going to serve in Her Majesty's army. But the conversation ended soon after when Ben suggested we go on a trip before Jonathan goes. I will have to ask my grandparents if it is all right. I'd ask Father, and suspect I may have to, but I feel apprehensive at the thought. So I confess to procrastinating and pushing it aside for now. After lunch, I excused myself from the lad's company, and returned home to conclude a few papers for university, bathe, and gussy myself up for engagement with Emily. We had planned to attend a recital together, then attend a quaint theatre she found off Leicester Square abouts. To my disappointment, I did not find her at her fashionable home in Chelsea. Her father's head maid informed me she had gone for a stroll in the park by the Embankment, much to the maid's protest. Brazen as ever, Emily didn't concern herself with a lady's nature, or worry for her own safety after dark in London. Though I fancy her, I do worry after her, and can't imagine what kind of land would produce such audacious women. Certainly not a land which might be called tame. I was quick to arrive at the park, which struck me as a very disquieting place. By no means am I a ninny, but I confess something about the park was eerie. I found myself looking into the dark shadows cast by the streets off the side of the bricked paths with apprehension, my hand close to the knife I carry under my coat. I found Emily walking around the central fountain, her left hand outstretched. She swirled around the column, her bare feet splashing in the water, her shoes clearly tossed aside so she might frolic like a nymph in the water. I felt myself relax and smile at the sight. Nearing her, I demanded she explain what she thought she was doing, running off without me so close to the time of our engagement. She smiled at me, giggled, and quickly leapt from the fountain, pattering up to me to give me a hug, and explained she felt like a mad woman waiting in that house, listening to a maid fussing about going out so late with a man. Feeling a bit cheeky, I may have implied, perhaps, the maid was right to warn her. As always, Emily raised a signature brow with her lips twisted into a taunting smile. "Oh, really, Mr. Thorne? Should I be worried? Is my honor at risk?" she asked, then rested her hands to her chest, then stretched one out towards the stars before allowing it to fall to her forehead. "Whatever shall I do?" she asked me. Before I could answer, the woman had the audacity to flick my nose, which, as any gentleman knows, cannot go unanswered. So I set upon her with a vicious attack of tickles, driving her back until she lay on the bench laughing and shooing me off. When we finished, I waited while she gathered and returned her shoes to her feet, but it was then I felt a strange sense, an uneasy feeling that lingered in my gut. As silly as it may sound, I was afraid. I felt as though someone were watching me. I did look about, but saw nothing. At least, nothing I wish to mention. I don't like quiet places at night. They remind me of my nightmares as a boy. I never told my father about my nightmares. He was struggling with the loss of mother and running his business. I never told him because I didn't want to be a bother. Regardless, I took Emily out of that place. Quickly I saw her away. The recital was nice, and by its end, enjoying some tea and biscuits served by the hostess whose daughter was performing, who was a very sweet woman who, if I were a more mischievous sort, might introduce to my father. A bit of warmth to melt the man back into the man grandmother told me about whenever she spoke of his youth and how similar we looked. Lester was another matter entirely. I dare say we caused quite a fuss, Emily holding me by my waist, leading me at a sprint through the crowds to the theatre so we wouldn't be late. Her laughter delights me every time someone chastises us. She has such strange taste. The theatre is a sham, small, cramped, dingy, and more fit for Camden. The performers were lackluster, and I suspect it will close before long, but she liked it. Spoke of it as having an honest charm, and being so poor that it was fun to watch. I told her if she wanted something so poor it was fun to watch, we might take a carriage through the East End, or watch pigs fly. Apparently I said something funny. I left her at home. I should confess to her my feelings and my intent, but I think first I should talk to grandfather, or perhaps Aunt Rebecca, to ask for their advice on if I should ask her father's permission. Yet I know neither will approve. Maybe I should just tell her and let what happens happen. But I love my family too much to want to hurt them. Grandfather will feel how he wants. Grandmother will undoubtedly follow. Aunt Rebecca I'm uncertain. But father, if he were to do one thing for me, I hope he would do this for me, and wish me happiness. I think I will retire now. It's late, and Harriet asked me to join him tomorrow for cards. I will be putting this journal by my bedside. I shall write again tomorrow.